Atul, thank you for taking the time to join me today. Just to set some context, you're in Philadelphia where you are a practicing physician, right?
That's absolutely right. I'm outside of Philadelphia, and I've been practicing here for about 2 decades.
Look, before we get into anything else, in the introduction, I called you the Chief Medical Officer for Image-Guided Therapy. What is image-guided therapy?
Yeah, it's not an unusual question because a lot of people, including my own family members, sometimes don't really understand what image-guided therapy is. So what is image-guided therapy? David, it's just fancy words for what I consider to be modern-day surgery. But now we can use minimally invasive techniques, threading miniature smart devices through your body. We guide it by advanced medical imaging. And that allows us to do what surgery used to do, or maybe even facilitate procedures that were never possible before. So actually, if you kind of go back in history, if you start from the beginning, surgery, as you know, goes back thousands of years. And for almost all of that time, it required us to open up a patient to see the disease. But now, thanks to technology, doctors like me have medical imaging so I can see inside your body without opening you up, using things like X-ray and CAT scan, MRI, and ultrasound. So when we say image-guided therapy, that's the imaging. But David, that's just half of the equation. The other half of the equation is the therapy, because technology also allows me to see inside of you and also treat you through miniature devices, things like angioplasty balloons or laser fibers, vascular implants. And that's the therapy. So at Philips, what we're doing is we're coupling the imaging to the therapy, and that's why we call it image-guided therapy. But David, I think that's a bit of a technical answer of what IGT is, and I would imagine, as a patient, even yourself, you might be asking yourself, what does IGT do? What does it even matter, right?
Just out of interest, I mean, you stated there the amount of years that you've been a physician. For how long has this level of technology been available to you as someone who's practicing?
Image-guided therapy is one of the newer fields in medicine, precisely because it's so technologically dependent. It's been around probably in some way, shape, or form for the last 50 years, but the true revolutions have taken place in the last decade, and I think the biggest shift is going to take place over the next decade. But let me give you an example of what are the types of things that image-guided therapy do, and why does it even matter? You probably already know, on average, 1 in 10 people undergo a surgical procedure every year. So that means over the next decade, it's highly likely that you or me or somebody close to us is going to need one too. But increasingly, that's a procedure that's going to take place in an image-guided therapy suite rather than the old-fashioned operating room. And these are procedures that might remove a clot from your brain to treat a stroke, or a procedure to treat a heart attack, or to kill or ablate a liver cancer or lung cancer, or even, yes, to treat blocked bile ducts in a patient with primary sclerosing cholangitis. But the magic is that image-guided therapy procedures are done through incisions not much larger than a pencil point. So you leave behind just a Band-Aid. What does that mean? It means it's less invasive. It's less cost, faster recovery. Sometimes you go home the same day. And even the ability of doing these procedures out of the hospital in outpatient settings. And what that means is we can bring care closer to the patients.
You talked there very briefly about the fact that, you might be in an image-guided therapy suite as opposed to a traditional operating theatre. I think that's something that's quite interesting because it highlights how the innovations can change the way that healthcare is being delivered to patients. Can we dive into that in a bit more detail and talk about some of those innovations and what else patients might begin to see? Because you mentioned there that the next leap is going to be over the next 10 years.
Absolutely, but sometimes we're so quick to jump to a solution without really analyzing what are we trying to solve for. The worst thing that you can do in the world, in my opinion, is just throw technology out there and hope it sticks, because then you get a very expensive paperweight. So we always start with looking at what is the unmet need, what is the problem that we're really trying to solve in healthcare. And so David, I think to understand what innovations are going to have the biggest impact on your care and on my care in the next decade, let's first take a step back and figure out what are we trying to fix? What are the challenges that hospitals, caregivers, even governments across the world are facing? There's no question that hospital systems around the world are under increasing pressure. Patients are getting older, they're getting sicker. And so what that means is the workloads are intensifying for physicians and also for the staff. Now, this was happening before COVID, but it's really accelerated since. And by the way, speaking of staff shortages It's rampant wherever I go around the world, and I know you travel as well. And I think it's only going to get worse. Not a week goes by where you or I don't read the headlines of nurse or doctor shortages, striking ambulance workers, striking nurses, even striking physicians in your country and even in mine. Burnout amongst doctors and nurses, it's at an all-time high. In fact, in the UK, to make it even more tangible, if you're having a heart attack or a stroke, you have to wait about 1.5 hours on average just for an ambulance. This is not sustainable. So on top of that challenge, I don't need to tell you, healthcare funds are shrinking no matter where you are in the world. So we have more patients, sicker patients, staff shortages, less money, and we desperately need to use technology to increase efficiency. Another tangible example, in the UK, hospitals are so full, they're turning patients away. I've seen this also in Australia and even here in the US. 1 in 10 patients in England, for instance, are now on a waiting list for non-emergency treatment, like, for instance, a hip transplant. So that is the problem that we're trying to solve for. And I think innovations like telehealth, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, these are the types of things that are going to revolutionize care. Why? Because they're going to help seasoned physicians do even more, take care of more patients more efficiently, more easily, maybe even remotely. It's going to help younger physicians get up to speed more quickly, more confidently. And I think these innovations are even going to support physician assistants to take on even more advanced aspects of care. So above all, it's going to help more patients in more places regain their quality of life no matter where they are in the world.
What I find interesting there is you talk about efficiencies and you talk about innovations and you use the word revolution. And to me, listening, there's a slight tension, I suppose, between efficiency and innovation because the two don't necessarily always go hand in hand. So can you zoom in on some of those technologies and just paint a bit more detail about how they are really revolutionizing the toolkit that's available to you as a physician?
Yeah, these future technologies for sure will increase efficiency. And I actually don't think that they're in conflict. Let me give you 2 tangible examples. Actually, I'll give you 2 tangible examples of not just the future, but some of these technologies that are in use today. So let's take, for instance, artificial intelligence, super hot topic. It's already making a difference in how care is being delivered today. And I think it's going to be even more deeply integrated into healthcare over time. So for instance, AI is already being embedded into CAT scanners. And what it does is acts as an early warning system to detect, for instance, stroke. So you may be on a CAT scanner, and as you're being scanned, the system is already processing the images of your brain while you're being scanned. And if it sees what appears to be a stroke, it automatically can activate a stroke response team, speeding up your intervention, allowing us to save more neurons. And that's happening today, efficiency. Or with cardiac disease. It used to be if you're in the hospital, nurses would check your vital signs every hour. It's a manual process. But now our AI is being deeply embedded into patient monitoring. So you have wearable biosensors, biostickers, that can now monitor your vital signs multiple times per second, and then crunch all of that data using AI. And then what it does is it can predict if you're at risk for a cardiac arrest. In fact, one hospital in the UK reduced cardiac arrests by trialing this technology by 86% on one ward. So we're using AI so that we can intervene before something goes wrong, rather than waiting until it happens. So that's what AI is doing already today. Or telehealth, that's another technology we need to keep our eye on. But that's happening today too. We have existing solutions to increase access to care, like the first integrated tele-ultrasound solution. And it allows caregivers like a midwife to consult with an expert obstetrician, even continents away. And so what this is doing is it's helping more people in more places have access to ultrasound. And so, David, those are 2 technologies already making a difference today. But I would love to tell you about 3 other technologies that I think we need to keep our eyes on.
I think it would be great to talk about those. And you mentioned 3 more. I suppose the 2 examples you've already given, especially with artificial intelligence and telehealth, go to the heart of the patient experience. But those 3 that you're about to talk about, what to you is the most telling thing when it comes to the patient's experience of care? Because I get the feeling that everything we've covered so far, you're looking at it very much through the lens of the physician, the hospital, looking at how we can provide better care. But I suppose the impact on the patient as well is part of that that's increasingly important to manage.
Let me give you one example of how technology is going to change the patient experience.
Yeah.
And I'll use lung cancer as the example. Lung cancer kills 1.5 to 2 million people every year. That's more than breast cancer, colon cancer, and prostate cancer combined. In the UK alone, 36,000 patients every year die from lung cancer. And so early diagnosis is critical for survival, just like with most cancers. Because if you can diagnose these cancers at the earliest stage, when they're just a couple of millimeters in size before they spread, that's when you have the best chance for cure. And so we have technology that's in the works. It's a new lung cancer solution. It's a revolutionary 3D imaging and a navigation platform that supports high precision diagnosis at the earliest stage, but also the minimally invasive treatment. And it all takes place in one room. So now as a patient, you or me, that holds the promise for one-stop shop, diagnosing and treating that tiny little cancer, destroying it all at the same time, all in one room, all without surgery. In fact, I was at a leading hospital in London recently, and I saw this in use firsthand in a trial. And so just imagine how something like that could change the patient experience. And there's 3 other technologies that exist that are equally going to affect the patient experience.
Look, I appreciate I jumped in and interrupted your flow. You did have 3 more examples that you wanted to talk about. So do you want to go into a bit more detail around those?
Yeah, we talked about AI and we talked about telehealth. And they're certainly interesting and they're going to have an increasing role over the future, next 10 years. But I think there's 3 other technologies we should keep our eyes on. One is augmented reality. We could actually take the telemedicine and the telehealth to the next level. In fact, research teams at Philips are already working on a solution right now to do just that. So they could, for instance, embed telehealth and AR together to help that obstetrician remotely guide a caregiver with virtual holograms, help them scan a patient. So for instance, the midwife could be guided by the obstetrician in New York to perform this ultrasound. Or in the operating room, which is where I work. AR is going to be a technology that lets me be even more efficient. It'll let me control the system, control the data, access the medical data instantly through gestures and voice control, even eye tracking. It lets me see your anatomy in a hologram instead of just on an old-fashioned 2D screen. Even lets me get a second person, real-time, second opinion. If I have a question, I can beam in an expert from the room next door or even continents away. So that's AR. Now, if you head into that robotics and automation, I think that's a pretty exciting space as well. Because robotics is going to help augment physicians to be even more accurate, to be even more precise. It's going to give us superhuman abilities, helping us treat more complex tumors or vascular disease. But it's also going to help lower the learning curve for complex procedures so that more patients can be treated by more physicians. Physicians will be uplifted with their skill set. And I can even foresee a future where robotics and automation will help increase access to care by unlocking remote procedures in locations where medical specialists might be scarce. So that's robotics. And maybe the final technology that we should keep our eye on, and I think it's probably personal to you as well, David, is X-ray. David, you've been pretty open about being a patient with biliary disease, primary sclerosing cholangitis, and I imagine you've probably had your fair share of X-rays or CAT scans, or you may be dealing with that in the future, I would imagine, no?
Yeah. There's well, I've been in the MRI scanner a few times.
Yeah, and X-rays and CAT scans, it's a double-edged sword. Let's be frank. X-ray should be respected, not feared. It's a life-saving technology. And already our systems have reduced radiation from these X-rays by about 80%. But it is a double-edged sword. It's a necessary evil to some degree. And it's been the same technology for over a century. But David, imagine if we made X-ray unnecessary. So using the wonders of light and sound, we're now developing a technology that lets us guide our therapy devices to see the inside of your body without X-ray, in 3D, in high resolution. And we use sound in a technology called IVUS, and we use light in a technology called FORS. These are hugely disruptive, and it's going to make procedures safer, not just for patients like you, but also for the doctors and the nurses, the staff that are also in that environment, the doctors and nurses who get the privilege of taking care of patients. And so maybe to summarize, because it's not about any one of these technologies, the trick is you want to put it all together. The future of healthcare, it's going to be powered by a mixture of artificial intelligence, AR, robotics, automation, photorealistic rendering, new ways of interacting with data, and radiation-less or maybe even radiation-free imaging. And I'm convinced I am going to be working in a room like that at some point in my career.
It's great to hear you say that you envisage yourself being in the room doing these things. But listen, holograms, robotics, using light instead of x-rays. Someone might listen to you here and think that they've stepped into a science fiction film or a novel by Arthur C. Clarke. I mean, what could be preventing progress? Because let's be honest, what you're talking about sounds on the fantastical side, I'd imagine, to most people's experience at the moment.
Yeah, but it's coming, and it's going to come in the next decade. But there are some hurdles that we have to tackle. And so what's preventing progress? Well, quite frankly, I think healthcare, it's a team sport. It is way too big, it is way too important for any one stakeholder, any one company to go at it alone. So I think we need collaboration, and that means collaboration between physicians, between hospitals, between governments, between the consumer technology companies, and then also with the leading health technology companies like Philips, for instance. I think it's that collaboration that's going to lead to the best innovation.
And if people do collaborate, and that leads us to the best form of healthcare, what could that future look like?
David, if I have to predict the future of healthcare, I am confident technology is going to make it faster. It's going to be more precise. It's going to be more personalized. It's going to be one and done, first time right. And care is going to be more accessible. It's going to take place closer to you, not just in a hospital. So the future of healthcare, it's extraordinarily exciting. These emergent technologies, things like image-guided therapy, AI, AR, robotics, automation, telehealth, they are just now starting to mature. And so we're going to see them unleashed over the next decade. So I would say hang on to your seat, David. The next decade in healthcare, it is going to be a fantastic ride.
And just look, as a final question, a very quick one to end on. When you were training to be a physician, did you envisage yourself talking about technology in these terms? You know, to anyone who might say, this is coming in the next 10 years. I suppose you've been in a position where you've seen what that progress is like to this point, right?
I worked in an environment where we were using beepers and fax machines. And very rapidly, we've digitalized healthcare. I think it's so hard to predict what's going to happen 20 or 30 years from now. But one thing I am confident about is we are headed in the right direction. And I just can't wait to see where we go next.
It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for giving up some time. I know that you're incredibly busy between the multiple hats that you wear. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, David.